Welcome back to Lena's Romantasy collection, your personal vault where the alphas are possessive and the humans have spines of steel. Quick check-in for the pack before we get to the blood and the banter. Where are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments and drop emoji if you've ever been bold enough to talk back to someone who could definitely bite. Today's story is a special one. It's gritty, it's intense, and it involves a very stressed barber holding a blade to a very dangerous king's throat. But before we start, if you want to support the collection and get early access to these stories, hit that join button down below. It helps me keep the lights on and the alphas coming. Now, steady your hands. The king is in the chair and he's losing his patience. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. Rain hammered the front window of the barbershop, drowning out the distant city sirens. Tessa swept the final pile of stray hair into her dustpan. She brushed a speck of dust off her faded denim apron, adjusting the collar of her plain black t-shirt. It was past midnight in the roughest district of the city. Normal people locked their doors hours ago. Tessa just wanted to finish mopping. A thunderous crash shook the walls. The back alley door splintered inward. The brass deadbolts snapped, rocketing across the room and bouncing off the baseboards. Wood fragments sprayed across the clean linoleum. Tessa dropped her broom. She snatched the straight razor resting on her counter, her thumb hovering over the latch. A man filled the broken doorway. He was imposing, built like a brick wall, with a jagged scar cutting across his left eyebrow. Wild, blood-soaked long hair plastered against his neck. His tailored suit was ruined by ash, rain, and deep, claw-like tears across the ribs. He stepped inside, bringing a sharp trace of cedar and cold rain with him. The scent filled the small shop, masking the usual smell of talc and soap. He kicked the shattered door shut. It hung off its bottom hinge. He grabbed a heavy iron supply rack and shoved it against the splintered wood, barricading the exit. The broken lock offered no protection now. "Do not scream," the man ordered. His voice resembled gravel grinding under a tire. Tessa kept the razor by her side. "I only scream when the landlord raises the rent. Who pays for my door?" He turned, his glowing eyes locking onto hers. They were striking, demanding obedience. He seemed shocked she was still standing. "Assassins hit my convoy 3 blocks away. Ashbourne men. I ordered my guards to scatter. I needed to vanish in the human district. If they catch my trail, they will kill everyone in this building." "Then you should leave," Tessa said. "They are tracking my profile. I need to change it." He gripped the leather back of her main barber chair. Blood dripped off his knuckles, pooling on the white floor tiles. Tessa stared at the spreading crimson stain. Pragmatism overrode her panic. She survived in this neighborhood by keeping a cool head and steady hands. "You are bleeding on my clean floor. Sit in the chair before you ruin the grout." He hesitated, a flash of surprise crossing his scarred face. He obeyed, sinking into the leather seat. He dwarfed the chair. Tessa walked over, her boots crunching on the broken doorframe. She grabbed a fresh towel and threw it over his ruined suit jacket. She reached for her best steel cutting shears resting on the glass shelf. Before she could grab the handles, his hand shot out. His grip locked around her wrist. His skin felt burning hot, radiating a feverish heat. He took the shears from her hand, inspecting the sharp steel blades. He flipped the tool around, offering the handle back to her while he held the open blades inches from his own throat. "Don't miss," he said. "If my hand shakes, he might actually bite me." Tessa took the shears. Her grip remained firm. "I never miss. Keep your head still." She assessed the wild mess of his hair. The blood matted the dark strands near his temples. She grabbed a spray bottle, misting the tangles to work the comb through. He flinched when the cold water hit a gash above his ear. "Sit still," Tessa commanded. "You have a sharp tongue for a human," he noted. "You have a lot of demands for a stray dog," she countered. He let out a low, rumbling sound. It felt like a growl instead of a laugh. "My name is Kade." "Tessa." She positioned the comb. "You said Ashbourne men. Sounds like a gang problem." "Something like that," Kade said. His eyes watched her every move in the mirror. They want my territory. They want my life. If I walk out of here looking like this, they will spot me from a mile away. We are taking it all off then, Tessa decided. She grabbed her electric clippers, flicking the switch. The hum filled the tense silence. Kade tensed his jaw. Just do it. Tessa placed a hand on the top of his head to guide his posture. He went rigid at her touch. She ignored his reaction, bringing the clippers to the base of his neck. The long, bloody locks began to fall, hitting the floor in wet thuds. The rain continued to hammer the glass outside, the only sound accompanying the buzz of the blades. Tessa maintained a steady rhythm, her focus locked on the task. She refused to look at the blood soaking through the towel. She refused to acknowledge the primal danger sitting in her chair. She just cut. Chapter 2. The pile of dark, blood-matted hair grew around the base of the leather chair. Tessa switched from the clippers back to her steel shears. She moved with practiced precision, blending the top. Kade sat motionless. He breathed in slow, measured rhythms, watching her hands in the wall mirror. With the wild mane gone, the man transformed. The sharp, tight military fade exposed the hard angles of his jaw and the thick muscles of his neck. The cut hid his royal identity, replacing the feral warlord aesthetic with the cold calculation of a street soldier. He looked unrecognizable. Tessa grabbed a soft brush, dusting the stray hairs off his neck. She unclipped the ruined towel and tossed it into the biohazard bin in the corner. Done, Tessa said. Kade stood. He rolled his shoulders, staring at his reflection. He ran a hand over the short fade. A strange expression crossed his face, a mix of loss and stark approval. He turned to face her. The sheer size of him dominated the cramped shop. Why are you not screaming? Tessa walked over to the sink to wash the blood off her hands. The cold water ran red down the drain. She grabbed a rag, scrubbing her skin until it turned pink. I told you, I am too broke to be scared of a bleeding man. Panic does not pay my bills. You needed a cut. I gave you a cut. I kicked down your door, Kade pointed out. And you are going to pay for it, Tessa replied, drying her hands on a clean rag. Along with the premium midnight service fee. Kade stepped closer. The proximity made Tessa's heart kick against her ribs like a trapped bird. She forced herself to stand tall. He reached inside the torn breast pocket of his charcoal suit. He pulled out a thick, waterproof stack of cash, bound in tight rubber bands. He dropped it on the glass counter. The impact produced a loud thud. Tessa glanced at the stack. The top bill was $100. The bundle was thick enough to choke a horse. It was enough cash to clear her shop's lease for 5 straight years. That is too much, Tessa said, keeping her voice level. It pays for the door. It pays for the silence, Kade said. He leaned in, his glowing eyes pinning her in place. You never saw me. If the Ashbourne men come asking, you tell them a drunk vagrant broke the lock and ran out the front. Understood? I mind my own business, Tessa said. It keeps me alive. Good. Kade turned toward the front door. He paused, his hand resting on the brass handle. You have steady hands, Tessa. It is my job, she answered. He opened the door. The storm roared outside, the wind throwing rain into the shop. Kade stepped out into the night, the darkness swallowing him. Tessa rushed to the door, throwing the deadbolt. She leaned against the cold wood, exhaling a breath she did not realize she held. Her knees trembled. The adrenaline crashed through her system, leaving her dizzy. She walked over to the sterilization station. She dropped the shears and the clipper guards into the blue barbicide liquid. She looked back at the counter. The waterproof stack of cash sat next to her register. She survived the night. Tessa grabbed the broom and started sweeping up the blood-soaked hair. She needed to clean the mess before morning. She needed to figure out how to fix the back door. Most importantly, she needed to forget the man named Kade. She dumped the hair into the trash bag, tying it tight. The sharp trace of cedar and cold rain lingered in the air, refusing to fade. She scrubbed the linoleum tiles until her knuckles ached, bleaching away the crimson stains. By the time the sun peeked over the city skyline, Casting a gray light through the rain-streaked window, the shop looked spotless. The only evidence of the intrusion remained the barricaded back door and the fortune sitting in her register. Tessa made a pot of black coffee, poured a mug, and sat in the leather chair. She stared at the mirror. She knew the rules of the city. You do not ask questions and you do not look back. But the memory of his intense stare burned in her mind. Chapter 3. The safe house sat on the edge of the industrial district, hidden behind the rust and decay of an abandoned shipping yard. Rain hammered the corrugated steel roof. Kade pushed through the heavy iron door, stepping into the stark, concrete room. Brant stood by a folding table, his arms crossed. The beta bore the rugged build of a seasoned enforcer. When Kade entered, Brant straightened, his eyes scanning the new military fade. "The disguise works," Brant stated. "The Ashbourne scouts lost your trail 3 blocks from the ambush point. They are searching the sewers. They think you went to ground." "I went to a barbershop," Kade said, shedding the ruined remnants of his charcoal suit jacket. He tossed the shredded fabric into a metal burn barrel in the corner. Brant raised an eyebrow. "A human establishment? That was a dangerous risk." "It was necessary," Kade replied. "If they caught my scent, they would have slaughtered everyone in the building. I contained the damage. Did we lose any men in the alley?" "No casualties," Brant confirmed. "The scatter order saved the vanguard. We regrouped here an hour ago. We are ready to strike back." Kade poured a glass of water from a plastic pitcher, downing it in one swallow. His muscles ached from the adrenaline crash. The feral beast beneath his skin wanted to hunt, demanding vengeance for the spilled blood. "We hold our position. We need intel on the leak. The Ashbourne pack knew our exact route. Someone talked." Brant nodded, his expression turning grim. "I will interrogate the perimeter guards." Kade set the glass down. He stared at his own hands. He still felt the phantom heat of her pulse against his skin. "I need you to look into someone else first. A human." Brant pulled a secure tablet from his jacket. "Name?" "Tessa. She runs a barbershop off 5th and Main. Small place, corner lot." Brant tapped the screen, his fingers flying across the digital keyboard. The glow of the tablet illuminated his focused face. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the steady drum of rain on the roof. "Got her," Brant said. "Tessa Hayes, 24 years old, grew up in the Narrows, both parents deceased. She took over the lease on the shop 3 years ago. Debt is low, just standard operating expenses, no criminal record, no known associations with any underworld factions. She is a ghost, a clean slate." Kade processed the information. She had no ties to the Ashbourne pack. She was just a civilian caught in the crossfire of a supernatural war. "Why the interest?" Brant asked, lowering the tablet. "Did she see something?" "She saw me covered in blood," Kade said. "I handed her a weapon, and she did not flinch. She just told me to stay off her clean floor." Kade, a human who doesn't flinch. I haven't seen that in a century. Brant chuckled, a low, guttural sound. "Ignorance is a powerful shield. She probably thought you were just another gang enforcer bleeding out in her chair." "Maybe," Kade murmured, "but I left a substantial amount of cash on her counter. If she is smart, she will use it to leave the city." "Humans are seldom smart when it involves money," Brant noted. Kade paced the length of the concrete room. His mind kept drifting back to the sharp scrape of the steel clippers and the steady rhythm of her breathing. He needed to focus on the Ashbourne threat, but the memory of her defiant stare proved distracting. "Put a silent watch on her shop," Kade ordered. 2 men. Roof access only. Do not engage unless the Ashbourne pack breaches the perimeter. I want to know if they track my scent back to her door." Brant frowned. "We are stretched thin, Kade. Devoting 2 men to guard a human barber is a waste of resources." Kade stopped pacing. He turned his gaze on his beta. The alpha authority flared in his eyes, demanding total submission. "It is my order, Brant. Execute it." Brant lowered his chin, baring his neck in a brief display of respect. "Consider it done." Kade turned back to the burn barrel, striking a match and tossing it inside. The ruined suit ignited, flames chewing through the blood-stained fabric. He watched the fire dance. The Ashbourne pack crossed a line tonight. They brought their war into the human streets. Kade intended to make them pay in blood. Chapter 4. 4 nights passed since the shattered door incident. Tessa fixed the deadbolt herself, installing a reinforced steel plate over the splintered wood. She kept the shop open, sweeping hair and trimming beards as if nothing happened. The waterproof stack of cash sat locked inside her small floor safe, a constant reminder of the chaos she survived. Tonight, the city felt restless. A thick fog rolled off the river, choking the narrow alleys in a gray haze. Tessa wiped down the mirrors, her eyes darting to the barricaded back door. She could not shake the feeling of being watched. A low snarl echoed through the brick corridor outside. Tessa froze, her rag hovering over the glass. The sound lacked any human quality. It vibrated with a raw, animalistic hunger that made the hairs on her arms stand up. She crept toward the back room, her boots silent on the linoleum. She pressed her back against the wall, peering through the small security window. The fog obscured the far end of the alley, but movement caught her eye near the dumpsters. 3 men stalked through the mist. They moved with a strange grace, sniffing the air like tracking hounds. One of them stopped right outside her door, his fingers trailing over the fresh steel plate. Tessa held her breath. A shadow dropped from the fire escape above. It hit the ground with a bone-shattering thud. The intruder near the door spun around. The shadow uncoiled, rising to a terrifying height. It was Kade. He wore a dark, tactical sweater and cargo pants, his military fade slick with mist. He did not say a word. He just attacked. The violence erupted fast and brutal. Kade seized the first man by the throat, lifting him off his feet and slamming him into the brick wall. The impact cracked the mortar. The other 2 men charged, their faces contorting. Their jaws extended, teeth elongating into sharp fangs. Tessa pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. Kade did not back down. As the attackers lunged, his own body shifted. The transformation happened in a blur of motion and horrific bone-cracking sounds. Muscles expanded, tearing through his dark sweater. Coarse fur erupted across his skin. His face elongated into a monstrous, wolf-like snout. Within seconds, a giant beast stood in the alley. It dwarfed the attackers, a nightmare composed of muscle, claws, and glowing, feral eyes. The Ashbourne scouts hesitated, realizing their fatal mistake. They brought knives to a monster fight. Kade lunged. His giant jaws clamped down on the nearest scout's shoulder. He tossed the man across the alley like a discarded rag doll. The third attacker drew a silver blade, slashing at Kade's collarbone. Kade caught the man's arm, twisting it until a loud snap echoed through the fog. The beast roared, a sound that shook the glass panes of Tessa's window. He tore the man apart. Tessa watched in pure, unfiltered horror as the giant beast dismantled the assassins with terrifying speed. Blood painted the wet bricks. The feral ferocity left no room for survival. It was an execution. Tessa stumbled back from the window. Her chest heaved, pulling in shallow, frantic breaths. Monsters were real. They were outside her shop. She scrambled into the main cutting room, grabbing a heavy iron chair and dragging it toward the hallway. The metal legs screeched against the tiles. She shoved the chair against the reinforced back door, wedging it under the handle. A wet, tearing sound echoed from the alley, followed by a final, gurgling gasp. Then, silence. Tessa backed into the corner, clutching her steel shears to her chest. Her chest tightened, stealing her breath. The silence felt worse than the snarling. She waited for the beast to smash through the steel plate. She waited for the wood to splinter again. Footsteps approached the door. Slow, deliberate, human footsteps. A fist pounded on the metal. 3 sharp knocks. "Tessa!" Kade's voice carried through the door, gruff and out of breath. "Open it!" Panic clawed at her throat. She gripped the shears tighter, her knuckles turning white. She stared at the barricade, her mind racing. "I saw you!" she yelled, her voice trembling. "I saw what you did!" "Open the door, Tessa," Kade demanded, the alpha command bleeding into his tone, "before more of them arrive." She refused to move. The reality of the night crashed down on her. The money, the blood, the impossible beast outside. Her quiet, pragmatic life just ended. She stood alone in her shop, armed with nothing but scissors, trapped with a monster on the other side of the glass. Chapter 5. Footsteps approached the reinforced back door. Slow, deliberate. A fist pounded on the metal. 3 sharp knocks broke the silence. "Tessa!" Kade's voice carried through the steel plate. It sounded gruff, drained of the feral roar from minutes ago. "Open it!" Panic closed her throat. Tessa gripped her steel shears, her knuckles turning white. She stared at the heavy iron chair wedged under the door handle. "I saw you!" she yelled. Her voice shook, betraying the calm she tried to project. "I saw what you did in the alley." "Open the door, Tessa," Kade demanded. The alpha command in his tone rattled the hinges. "Before more of them arrive." "No!" "Tessa, he tore 3 men to pieces, yet he knocks like a gentleman. The math does not add up." Silence stretched on the other side of the barricade. Tessa waited for the wood to splinter. She waited for the beast to smash through the steel plate. Instead, Kade sighed. "Tessa, the Ashbourne pack knows my scent leads here. I have to burn this building to break the trail. If you stay inside, you burn with it." She blinked. Her pragmatic mind fought through the terror. She needed her shop. It kept her fed. It kept a roof over her head. But the dead men in the alley were real. The blood on the bricks was real. She grabbed the iron chair and yanked it backward. The metal legs shrieked against the tiles. She turned the deadbolt and pulled the door open, taking a quick step back. Kade stood on the threshold. He wore his human face. The dark tactical sweater stretched tight across his chest, ripped at the shoulder. A harsh, localized chemical burn marked his collarbone where the silver blade grazed him. The wound smoked, raw and angry red. Tessa raised the shears, pointing the sharp blades at his chest. "What are you?" Kade did not flinch. He looked at the shears, then met her eyes. "I am a Lycan, a werewolf." "Wolves walk on 4 legs. They live in the woods. They do not get military fades and drop stacks of cash on glass counters." "My kind adapted," Kade said. He stepped inside. He moved past the point of her shears without a second glance. "We run businesses. We hold territory. We enforce laws. The men outside were challengers who broke those laws." "You tore a man's arm off." "He tried to stab me with silver," Kade stated. He walked to the center of the cutting room, his boots leaving wet tracks. "Pack your things. You have 5 minutes." Tessa lowered the shears. Her ribs tightened like a vice. "I am not leaving my shop. I fixed the door. I will clean the alley. I survive by staying out of gang wars." "This is not a street war. It is a hunt." Kade gestured to the broken back frame. "Your cover is blown. They tracked me here. They will send more scouts. When they find you, they will torture you to learn my location. Then, they will kill you." "I do not know your location." "They will not care." Kade reached into his cargo pocket and produced a steel lighter. He flipped the lid open. "I gave you enough money to clear your lease and buy your life. Right now, you need to survive the night." Kade. She demands logic while her world burns. A rare trait. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My estate. It is secure." "Am I a prisoner?" "You are a liability if you stay here. You are under my protection if you come with me." He struck the lighter. The flame cast harsh shadows across his face. 4 minutes, Tessa." Tessa stared at the flame. She built this business from nothing. It was all she had. But a dead woman could not cut hair. She turned and ran to the back room. She grabbed a faded duffel bag and shoved her clothes inside. She grabbed her small lockbox, the waterproof stack of cash, and her premium electric clippers. Survival required tools. She zipped the bag, slung it over her shoulder, and walked back into the main room. Kade grabbed a heavy gallon jug of high-proof rubbing alcohol from her supply cabinet. He splashed the clear chemical across the walls, dousing the mirrors and the leather chair. He tossed the lighter. The liquid caught fire, erupting into a wall of bright heat. "Out the front," Kade ordered. They walked out the main entrance into the foggy street. Behind them, the shop windows shattered. Flames licked the brick exterior. Tessa kept her eyes forward. She did not look back. Chapter 6. Kade led Tessa 3 blocks down the street, stopping beside a sleek, sapphire metallic SUV parked in a dark alley. He opened the passenger door. Tessa threw her duffel bag onto the leather seat and climbed inside. The engine roared to life. Kade navigated the wet city streets with precision, leaving the burning narrows behind. The fog thinned as they drove higher into the hills. Tessa stared out the window, watching the rundown tenements shift into sprawling mansions hidden behind tall stone walls. "You healed," Tessa broke the silence. She pointed to his ribs, visible through the tear in his sweater. The deep claw marks from the first night were gone. "Fast cellular regeneration," Kade replied, keeping his eyes on the road. "A benefit of the bloodline, but silver burns. It stops the healing process and chars the tissue." "Like the burn on your collarbone?" Kade nodded. "It will scar. Silver always leaves a mark." He turned the wheel, pulling up to a towering iron gate. Security cameras tracked their approach. The gate swung open, revealing a sprawling stone estate surrounded by ancient oak trees. Guards in dark suits patrolled the perimeter. They carried assault rifles and moved with the same predatory grace Kade displayed. Kade parked the SUV near the front steps. A man with a rugged build waited by the double doors. Tessa recognized the stance of a seasoned enforcer. "This is Brant," Kade said, stepping out of the vehicle. "My beta, second in command." Brant assessed Tessa, his eyes scanning her work attire and the duffel bag slung over her shoulder. He gave a sharp nod. "The perimeter is secure. I set up the holding cell in the basement." Tessa stopped walking. Her grip tightened on her bag. "Holding cell?" Kade shot Brant a warning look. "She is not a prisoner, Brant. Prepare the guest wing." Brant frowned, his jaw ticking. "She is human. She poses a security risk. Protocol dictates the lower levels until she is cleared." "I cleared her," Kade stated. The Alpha Authority flared, leaving no room for debate. "Show her to the guest suite." Brant lowered his chin. "Understood." Tessa followed them into a grand foyer lined with marble floors and vaulted ceilings. The luxury felt alien compared to her cramped, linoleum-floored barbershop. Brant led her down a wide corridor, opening a set of double oak doors. The room was vast. A king-sized bed dominated the center, flanked by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a manicured courtyard. Tessa dropped her bag on the rug. She turned to Kade. "Let us establish some boundaries." Kade leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "I am listening." "I am not a hostage," Tessa said. "I am not a pet. I work for a living. If I stay here, I need a job. You owe me wages for the shop you just turned to ash." "Tessa, I trade a small trap for a rich one, but at least this one has guards." Kade raised an eyebrow. "You want to work." "I cut hair," she replied. "I saw your guards outside. Half of them look like they cut their own hair with a combat knife. You hire me. I become your personal groomer. I get a designated workspace, and I get paid weekly." Brant scoffed from the hallway. "You want to demand wages from the Lycan King?" Kade held up a hand, silencing his beta. He looked at Tessa, his glowing eyes studying her defiant posture. He respected a fighter. "Kade, she treats my fortress like an employer's office. Fascinating." "Done," Kade agreed. "You are my personal groomer. You have free reign of the guest wing and the gardens. You do not go near the perimeter without an escort. You do not talk to the staff about the Ashbourne pack." "Deal," Tessa said. She pointed to a sleek wooden chair by the window. "Sit down. Your fate is a mess from the fight." Chapter 7. The The morning sun filtered through the grand windows of the guest suite. Tessa transformed the corner of the room into a makeshift workstation. She arranged her steel shears, combs, and premium clippers on a polished oak side table. Kade sat in the wooden chair, a dark towel draped over his broad shoulders. He shed his ruined tactical sweater, leaving his torso bare. Tessa stood behind him. The proximity sparked a heavy tension in the quiet room. Her hands felt ice-cold against the feverish heat radiating from his skin. She grabbed the clippers, cleaning up the edges of his fade. "You flinched," Kade noted, his voice a low rumble. "Your skin runs hot," Tessa replied. "It feels like standing next to an open oven." She turned off the clippers and reached for her straight razor to line up his neck. As she leaned in, her eyes caught the angry red burn on his collarbone. The silver strike from the alley left a jagged, dark scar against his pale skin. "Does it still hurt?" she asked, her voice dropping. "It burns," Kade admitted, "but it serves as a reminder. Carelessness gets a king killed." Tessa focused on her work, gliding the razor along his neckline. She wiped the excess shaving cream on a hand towel. As Kade shifted his weight, he rested his hands on his knees. Tessa paused. On his right hand, he wore a thick, scarred leather glove. It covered his fingers down to the wrist. Over the leather, a heavy silver signet ring gleamed in the sunlight. It featured a raised wolf crest, marking his authority. "Why the glove?" Tessa asked. She placed the razor down and picked up a soft brush. "You only wear it on one hand." "Tessa, one slip and I touch the monster, but his skin just feels like a man's." Kade lifted his hand, inspecting the ring. "The signet is tradition. It belonged to my father, and his father before him. It proves my claim to the throne." "But it is silver," Tessa said, connecting the dots. "You said silver burns." "It does," Kade confirmed. "Werewolves cannot touch silver without protective gear. It chars our flesh and poisons our blood. Holding this ring with a bare hand is a death sentence. The leather protects me from my own crown." "That seems like a flawed system," Tessa observed. She dusted the stray hairs from his shoulders. "Wearing the one thing that can kill you." "It is a test of discipline," Kade explained. He turned his head, looking up at her. "Power is dangerous. A leader must carry the weight of that danger every single day without letting it destroy him. The glove keeps me safe, but the heat of the silver through the leather keeps me awake." "Kade, her hands calm the fire in my blood. She asks the right questions." Tessa unclipped the towel from his neck. "Discipline makes sense, but it sounds exhausting." "Survival usually is," Kade said. He stood up, stretching his tall frame. He towered over her, casting a long shadow across her workstation. He reached into his pocket with his bare hand and pulled out a thick, unmarked black metal credit card. He set it on the oak table. "What is this?" Tessa asked. "Your expense account," Kade stated. "It has no limit. You demanded a job. I expect quality work." Tessa picked up the heavy card. The financial transaction grounded her in reality. The monsters, the silver, the burning shop, it all faded into the background when she held tangible proof of her employment. "I always deliver quality," she said. "Good," Kade said. He walked toward the double doors. "Get dressed in something practical. I need you in my office in 10 minutes." "Why?" Kade paused in the doorway. "You live in my territory now. You need to know the rules of the war." Chapter 8. Kade's office sat in the center of the estate. It lacked the ornate decorations of the grand foyer. Instead, the room functioned as a war room. A wide oak desk dominated the space, covered in stacked files and communication devices. Tessa walked in, her boots quiet on the thick rug. Kade stood behind the desk. Brant stood near the window, his arms crossed, watching her with open distrust. Kade pressed a button on a remote. The wall panels slid back, revealing a large digital map of the city. Red and blue zones divided the streets. "Sit down, Tessa," Kade instructed, pointing to a leather chair across from his desk. She sat, keeping her posture straight. She refused to show intimidation in front of the beta. "If you are going to live under my roof, you need to know the threats," Kade began. He tapped a laser pointer against the screen, highlighting a massive red zone on the eastern docks. "This is Ashbourne territory. They operate out of the shipping yards. They smuggle weapons, run extortion rackets, and kill for sport." "Tessa, he is handing me his battle plans. He actually trusts me." "And you?" Tessa asked. "Are you the good guys?" Brant let out a harsh laugh. "We maintain order. We keep the violence out of the human districts. Ashbourne wants chaos. Chaos creates profit." Kade shot Brant a look, silencing him. He turned his focus back to Tessa. "My pack controls the central and western districts, the blue zones. We enforce a strict code. No hunting humans. No forced conversions. Ashbourne believes humans are food. We believe they are civilians." "So they attacked your convoy to take the blue zones?" Tessa reasoned. "Yes," Kade confirmed. "They hit us with silver-laced gas. It crippled my guards. That is why I issued the scatter order and broke into your shop. I needed to break their tracking line." Kade walked around the desk, leaning against the edge. He crossed his arms, his glowing eyes fixed on her. The proximity commanded her full attention. "The Ashbourne pack uses brutal tactics," Kade continued. "They do not fight fair. They use poison, traps, and hostages. If they breach this estate, you do not try to fight them. You run. You find a panic room and you lock the door." "I am not a fighter," Tessa said. "I cut hair." "You survived the Narrows," Kade countered. "You have instincts. Use them. If you see a wolf with ash-gray fur and yellow eyes, you run. If you smell copper and sulfur, you run." Kade, if she knows the enemy, she knows how to survive. Ignorance gets humans killed. Tessa nodded, absorbing the information. She looked at the map, memorizing the safe zones. "Why are you telling me all this? Brant thinks I am a security risk." "Brant is paid to be paranoid," Kade said flatly. "I am telling you because you deserve the truth. You lost your business because of my war. I will not keep you blind in my home." The honesty disarmed her. Tessa expected a dictator. She expected a monster who ruled through fear. Instead, she found a commander who took accountability for the danger he brought to her door. "I understand," Tessa said. She stood up, meeting his intense gaze. "I stay in the blue zones. I run from the gray wolves." "Exactly," Kade said. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. "Brant will show you the locations of the panic rooms. Memorize them." Tessa walked out of the office, her mind spinning with pack politics and territory lines. She survived the streets by keeping her head down. Now, she stood in the center of a supernatural war, and the Lycan King trusted her to keep up. Chapter 9. Tessa gripped the cold stone railing of the balcony. Below her, the central courtyard stretched out, paved with dark cobblestones. A crowd of 50 people formed a perfect circle. Nobody spoke. The silence hung heavy in the crisp morning air. In the center, Kade stood over a kneeling man. Brant flanked the king's right side, holding a thick leather ledger. Tessa leaned forward. The kneeling man trembled. He looked young, his head bowed. Blood stained his torn collar. "You abandoned the western perimeter." Kade's voice echoed off the stone walls. It carried no anger, only a chilling calm. "I pursued a scout, Alpha," the young man pleaded, his voice cracking. "I thought I could catch him. I wanted to prove myself." "You broke formation. You left a gap in our defenses." Kade stepped closer. He raised his right hand. The thick leather glove creaked. The silver signet ring caught the pale sunlight, a stark reminder of his authority. "Enemy troops used that gap. 3 of our border guards died holding the line you abandoned." "Tessa, he is a judge delivering a death sentence. The king replaces the man." "I beg for mercy," the guard whispered, pressing his forehead to the cobblestones. "Mercy breeds hesitation," Kade stated. "Hesitation gets my people killed. You are stripped of your rank. You are exiled from this territory. If you cross the borders again, you forfeit your life." The young man sobbed. Brant stepped forward, hauling the exiled wolf to his feet and dragging him toward the heavy iron gates. The crowd parted, keeping their eyes locked on the ground. Kade turned on his heel and walked back into the estate. Tessa retreated from the balcony. Her stomach knotted. She navigated the wide corridors, heading straight for the war room. She found Kade standing over the digital map, his hands braced on the edge of the oak desk. "That was brutal," Tessa announced, stepping into the room. Kade did not look up. "That was justice." "He was just a kid," Tessa argued. She crossed her arms, anchoring her feet to the floor. "He made a mistake. You threw him to the wolves." "We are the wolves, Tessa." Kade finally raised his head. The weight of the crown showed in the tension of his jaw. "He left a hole in our shield. My men died to plug it. If I forgive him, the rest of the pack learns that orders are optional. Discipline shatters. Then Ashbourne slaughters us all. There has to be a middle ground, a punishment that does not involve banishing a kid to die." "There is no middle ground in a war." Kade walked around the desk, closing the distance between them. The heat of his skin radiated into the cool air. "You run a business. If an employee burns your shop down by mistake, do you keep paying them?" "I fire them. I do not issue a death threat." "My currency is blood," Kade countered. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous rumble. "If I show weakness, challengers rise. My pack relies on my strength to keep them safe. I will bear the guilt of exile to ensure the survival of the rest." "Kade. She challenges my rule. She sees the cruelty, but she demands better. I need that fire." Tessa held her ground. Her pragmatic mind understood the logic, but her human heart rejected the coldness. "You carry too much. It will crush you." "It is my burden to carry," Kade said. "You stay in the guest wing. You keep your head down. Let me handle the monsters." "I am standing in a room with one," Tessa replied, refusing to back down. Kade paused. The tension snapped taut between them. He reached out, his bare left hand stopping an inch from her shoulder. He curled his fingers into a fist and pulled back. "Remember the rules, Tessa. I keep you alive. You do not question how I do it." He walked past her, leaving the office in heavy silence. Tessa stared at the glowing map on the wall. The blue zones felt a lot smaller now. She realized the true cost of the king's protection. It required unquestioned, unforgiving authority. Chapter 10. The estate library smelled of old paper and wood polish. Rain tapped against the arched glass panes, breaking the midnight silence. Tessa sat in a plush wingback chair, turning the pages of a thick history book she could not focus on. The confrontation in the office lingered in her mind. The heavy oak door swung open. Kade stepped inside. He wore a fresh black button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked drained. The endless meetings and perimeter checks exacted a toll. He walked to a crystal decanter on a side table, pouring an amber liquid into a short glass. "You are awake," Kade noted, taking a slow sip. "I am not used to sleeping in mansions," Tessa said. She closed the book, setting it on the side table. "I prefer the noise of the city. Sirens, traffic. It makes sense to me." "This place is too quiet for you." Kade moved toward the center of the room. He sat on the edge of a leather sofa opposite her chair. He rested his forearms on his knees, staring down at his glass. "It feels like holding your breath," Tessa corrected, "waiting for the other shoe to drop." "The Ashbourne pack test the borders every night. We repel them, but the shield is cracking. Brant believes an insider feeds them our patrol routes." Kade swirled the liquor. "He suspects everyone." "Even me?" Kade looked up. "Brant trusts the bloodline. You are outside the bloodline, but I know you are clean." "Because I cut your hair instead of your throat?" "Because you demand wages and argue with my rulings." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "An assassin would flatter me. You just yell at me." "Tessa, he looks less like a warlord and more like a man right now, a very exhausted man." Tessa leaned forward. I lost everything I built. My chair, my mirrors, my independence. I argue because I refuse to let this new world make me a victim. You are no victim, Tessa. Kade set the glass down. He stood up and closed the gap between them. He stopped right in front of her chair. The sheer size of him blocked out the ambient light from the hallway. You have more spine than half my enforcers. He reached down. This time, he did not pull away. His bare fingers brushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The touch sent a shockwave through her chest. Her heart thrashed against her ribs. The feverish heat of his skin contrasted with the cool air of the library. Tessa tilted her head up. Her breath hitched. The proximity erased the pack politics and the war outside. "Kade," she whispered. He leaned down. His gaze dropped to her lips. The raw, electric pull between them overrode logic. He closed his eyes, his face inches from hers. A blaring, mechanical siren shattered the quiet. Red emergency lights flashed from the ceiling fixtures, bathing the library in a harsh crimson glow. Kade snapped backward. His eyes flew open. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the lethal focus of a commander. The romantic tension evaporated, chased away by the screaming alarm. Kade. For 1 second, I forgot the war. That mistake cost lives. The oak door burst open. Brant sprinted into the room, a submachine gun gripped in his hands. "The eastern gates!" Brant yelled over the siren. "The perimeter shields are down. Someone cut the main power lines from the inside." "How many?" Kade demanded, sprinting toward the door. "Dozens! They are swarming the courtyard. Ashbourne is inside the walls." Kade turned back to Tessa. "Get up, now!" The other shoe just dropped. Chapter 11. The estate transformed into a war zone. The siren blared in a continuous, deafening loop. Red strobe lights pulsed through the wide corridors, casting disorienting shadows against the marble walls. "Move!" Kade shouted, grabbing Tessa's hand. He pulled her out of the library and into the main hall. Gunfire erupted from the front of the house. The deep, rhythmic bursts of assault rifles echoed through the stone structure. Glass shattered. A heavy thud shook the floorboards, followed by a chorus of visceral, animalistic snarls. "They bypassed the outer guards," Brant yelled, taking point. He raised his weapon, sweeping the corners. "They are pushing toward the grand foyer." "Secure the central staircase," Kade ordered Brant. "Do not let them reach the upper levels. I am taking her to the vault." Brant nodded, peeling off down an intersecting hallway. Kade yanked Tessa in the opposite direction. They sprinted past priceless paintings and antique tables. Tessa struggled to keep up with his long strides. Her lungs burned. She squeezed his hand, drawing courage from his iron grip. "Tessa, the war just walked through the front door. The blue zones are gone." "Listen to me," Kade said, not breaking his stride. "We take the service corridor to the basement. The panic room has a reinforced titanium door. You get inside. You lock it. You do not open it for anyone but me." "What about you?" Tessa asked, gasping for air. "I hunt." They rounded a corner, entering a narrow passage intended for estate staff. The lighting flickered. Halfway down the hall, the heavy wooden door leading to the kitchens exploded inward. Wood shrapnel rained across the passage. Kade shoved Tessa hard against the wall, shielding her with his body. 2 men stepped through the ruined doorway. They possessed the Ashbourne markers, ash-gray fur erupting along their forearms and yellow, predatory eyes. They stank of copper and sulfur. The invaders lunged. Kade met the charge head-on. He did not shift. He used raw, brutal momentum. He caught the first attacker by the throat, driving him backward into the stone wall with a sickening crunch. The second attacker drew a curved blade and slashed at Kade's side. Kade blocked the strike with his forearm, his leather glove deflecting the metal. He twisted the attacker's wrist, snapping the bone. The man howled in pain. Kade delivered a punishing blow to the man's temple, dropping him to the floor. "Keep moving!" Kade roared, throwing the first attacker to the ground. Tessa pushed off the wall and ran. She reached the end of the service corridor, pushing through a set of swinging doors that opened into a secondary sitting room. More glass shattered above them. A skylight caved in. 3 massive wolves dropped into the room, landing between Tessa and Kade. The Ashbourne wolves snapped their jaws, their yellow eyes fixed on Kade. They ignored Tessa, fixing their focus on the rival alpha. Kade stood his ground, cracking his knuckles. The primal shift rippled under his skin, his muscles expanding. "Run, Tessa!" Kade commanded, his voice distorting into a feral growl. Tessa hesitated. She looked at the beasts separating them. Survival instinct kicked in. She turned and bolted through the nearest archway, sprinting blind into the maze of the estate. She heard the explosive sound of flesh meeting bone behind her, but she did not look back. Chapter 12. Tessa ran until her legs went numb. The pulse of the red emergency lights guided her through the unfamiliar wing. She took sharp turns, navigating a gallery of marble statues and empty display cases. Gunfire echoed from a distant floor. The siren continued its relentless wail. She burst through a set of heavy oak doors, skidding to a halt. She recognized the vaulted ceilings and the sweeping double staircase. She stood in the grand foyer. The front entrance lay in ruins. The massive mahogany doors were splintered off their hinges. Rain blew in from the courtyard, soaking the expensive rugs. Bodies littered the floor, estate guards and Ashbourne soldiers locked in fatal embraces. Tessa backed away from the carnage, looking for a side exit. She needed to reach the basement. She needed the panic room. A low, wet snarl stopped her in her tracks. From the shadows under the sweeping staircase, a massive wolf emerged. It possessed ash-gray fur, matted with rain and blood. Its yellow eyes locked onto Tessa. It dropped its snout to the floor, inhaling deeply. The beast caught her scent. A human, easy prey. "Tessa, I survived the Narrows, just to die in a mansion." Kade's voice echoed in her memory. "If you see a wolf with ash-gray fur and yellow eyes, you run." Tessa spun around and sprinted toward the East Wing corridor. The wolf launched itself across the marble floor. Its claws scrambled for traction on the polished stone. Tessa ducked behind a heavy marble pillar just as the beast lunged. The wolf crashed into the stone, cracking the column. Dust rained down. Tessa scrambled backward, using the environment to her advantage. She shoved a heavy pedestal holding a bronze sculpture into the wolf's path. The heavy bronze crashed to the floor. The beast tripped, sprawling across the slick marble. Tessa scrambled to her feet and darted toward the staircase. She grabbed the ornate wooden banister, hauling herself up the first 3 steps. The wolf recovered faster than any natural animal. It bounded forward, cutting off her path up the stairs. It planted its front paws on the 4th step, towering over her. Saliva dripped from its exposed fangs. Tessa backed down the steps, her boots slipping on a patch of rainwater. She hit the floor hard, the breath leaving her lungs in a rush. The Ashbourne wolf stalked down the steps, cornering her against the ruined front doors. The beast bared its teeth, a guttural growl vibrating in its chest. It prepared for the kill. Tessa scanned the floor. Her fingers brushed against the handle of a discarded combat knife left by a fallen guard. She gripped the hilt, pulling it tight against her side. She remembered her own rule: I never miss. The wolf tensed its hind legs. The yellow eyes narrowed. It lunged, snapping its jaws straight for her throat. Chapter 13. The ash-gray beast launched off its hind legs. Its yellow eyes narrowed, tracking the fragile human target. Saliva trailed from its exposed fangs. It aimed straight for Tessa's throat. Tessa dropped to her knees on the wet marble. She gripped the discarded combat knife with both hands, bracing the hilt against the floorboards just as the wolf descended. The heavy beast crashed into her. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. The steel blade caught the wolf in the shoulder, sinking deep into muscle and coarse fur. The creature let out an ear-splitting howl. It thrashed, its sheer weight pinning Tessa to the slick floor. A clawed paw swiped down. The strike tore through the fabric of her plain black t-shirt, carving 3 jagged lines across her left arm. Searing pain radiated from her bicep. Her grip faltered. The wolf twisted its torso, ripping the knife from her hands and sending the weapon clattering across the grand foyer. Tessa scrambled backward, her boots slipping on the rainwater pooling near the ruined entrance. The siren blared above, a relentless mechanical scream. Red strobe lights flashed, painting the horrific scene in jagged bursts of crimson. The wolf snapped the knife blade with its teeth, spitting the metal shards onto the rugs. It locked its yellow eyes back on Tessa. The beast lowered its snout, the smell of copper and sulfur filling the air between them. It prepared for a second, fatal strike. 3 corridors away, Kade crushed the windpipe of the final Ashborn attacker in the sitting room. He tossed the lifeless body aside, his chest heaving. The combat took seconds, but seconds cost lives. He inhaled sharply, drawing the scent of the estate into his lungs. He smelled the rain. He smelled the sharp, metallic tang of the battlefield, and beneath it all, he smelled Tessa's freshly spilled blood. Kade sprinted. He tore through the service passages, his boots tearing up the carpet. He rounded corners with reckless momentum, his shoulders slamming into the plaster walls. The red emergency lights cast long, warped shadows ahead of him. His heart pounded a relentless drumbeat against his ribs. He ordered his beta to hold the stairs. He ordered his guards to secure the perimeter. He ordered Tessa to hide. He breached the archway leading into the grand foyer. He saw the splintered mahogany doors. He saw the bodies of his fallen enforcers. He saw the towering Ashborn wolf cornering the human barber against the stone wall. Tessa pushed herself up, her back flat against the cold stone. She had nowhere left to run. Her arm bled, the crimson staining her torn shirt. She met the wolf's gaze, her chin raised. She refused to cower. The beast lunged. It did not aim for a bite. It swung its massive head, using its thick skull as a battering ram. The wolf struck Tessa square in the chest. The force lifted her off the ground. She flew backward, airborne for a terrible, suspended second. She slammed into the marble pillar behind her. The sickening crack of bone echoed under the vaulted ceilings, cutting through the wail of the siren. Tessa crumpled. She hit the floor like a discarded rag doll. Her limbs went loose. Her head lolled to the side, her face pale under the strobe lights. She lay perfectly still on the wet stone. No, not her. Never her. Kade stopped breathing. The war around him ceased to exist. The gunfire from the upper levels faded into static. The flashing red lights blurred into a solid, blinding haze. He stared at the motionless body of the woman who held a blade to his throat and demanded wages from a king. He stared at the fragile human who refused to flinch. The Ashborn wolf turned, its ears twitching. It spotted Kade standing in the archway. The beast bared its teeth, a low growl vibrating in its throat. It stepped over Tessa, preparing to challenge the rival alpha. Something deep inside Kade's mind snapped. The tether of his sanity, the discipline of the crown, the control he practiced for decades, it all vanished. He ripped the scarred leather glove and the heavy silver signet ring off his right hand with his teeth, spitting the deadly metal into the shadows. The human king died in that archway. Only the monster remained. Chapter 14. The transformation defied nature. Kade did not shift with the practiced, controlled grace of an alpha enforcing the law. He erupted. His dark button-down shirt and cargo pants shredded into confetti as his frame violently expanded outward. Bones cracked with the volume of snapping timber. Thick, midnight black fur pierced his skin. His jaw unhinged, elongating into a terrifying snout lined with razor-sharp teeth. He grew taller, broader, dwarfing his usual imposing human stature. He became a behemoth of pure, unadulterated nightmare. His eyes did not glow with their usual commanding light. They burned with a blinding, feral fire, the ultimate state of Lycan rage. The ash-gray Ashborn wolf took one look at the towering black beast and recognized its fatal error. The challenger's growl turned into a high-pitched whine. It scrambled backward, its claws slipping on the wet marble, desperate to escape the grand foyer. Kade did not let it run. He crossed the room in a single, earth-shaking bound. He slammed the Ashborn scout into the stone floor, his giant jaws clamping around the creature's midsection. He bit down. He shook his head side to side, treating the enemy like a fragile toy. He tossed the broken carcass across the room. It shattered a display case and did not move again. Footsteps thundered from the courtyard. Through the splintered front doors, the main Ashborn assault force poured into the foyer. 20 wolves, all bearing ash-gray fur and yellow eyes, flooded the entrance. They smelled their dead scout. They smelled the blood. They charged. Kade roared. The sound lacked any trace of humanity. It was a promise of slaughter. He waded into the pack. He used no strategy. He used no defensive tactics. He became an engine of destruction. 3 wolves leaped at his back. Kade spun, his thick arms swatting 2 of them out of the air. The impact crushed their ribs, sending them crashing into the sweeping double staircase. The 3rd bit into his shoulder. Kade ignored the pain. He reached back, gripped the wolf by the scruff of its neck, and slammed it face first into the marble floor until the stone cracked. Brant emerged at the top of the central staircase, his submachine gun raised. 4 estate enforcers flanked him, ready to lay down covering fire. They froze. Brant lowered his weapon. His rugged face paled. The enforcers took a collective step back, their eyes wide with terror. Below them, their king dismantled the enemy force with horrifying brutality. Kade tore limbs from sockets. He crushed skulls under his giant paws. Ashborn wolves tried to flee, realizing the trap they walked into. Kade hunted them down before they reached the ruined doors. He painted the expensive rugs and the marble pillars with enemy blood. He sustained bites. He took claw strikes to his flanks. He did not slow down. The feral rage insulated him from the physical toll. He fought for the motionless woman lying near the pillar. He fought to punish the world that broke her. The grand foyer became a graveyard. The last Ashborn attacker tried to crawl toward the courtyard rain. Kade pinned the beast with one paw, ending the struggle with a final, brutal snap of his jaws. Silence descended on the room, broken only by the wail of the siren and the heavy, wet breathing of the feral alpha. Kade stood in the center of the carnage, his midnight fur dripped with dark blood. He let out another roar, challenging the shadows, challenging his own men on the stairs. He paced the ruined floor, his yellow eyes darting, searching for more things to kill. The bloodlust refused to fade. He forgot his own name. He forgot his crown. He knew only violence. Chapter 15. Pain woke Tessa. It started as a dull ache and sharpened into a blinding spike every time her chest expanded. She gasped, her throat dry and tasting of copper. Her side felt locked in a vice. Her left arm throbbed, the torn black t-shirt sticking to her skin. She opened her eyes. The red strobe lights continued their relentless pulse, but the deafening siren had finally died. Only the steady drum of rain hitting the puddles in the grand foyer remained. Tessa rolled onto her good side, gritting her teeth against the agony in her ribs. She pushed herself up onto her elbows. The world spun. She blinked away the black spots dancing in her vision. She looked across the room. The devastation stole the rest of her breath. Bodies covered the floor. The Ashborn pack lay scattered in pieces across the ruined rugs and cracked marble. Blood soaked into the stone grout. In the center of the carnage stood a monster. It dwarfed the beast she saw in the alley. It possessed midnight black fur, thick muscles, and a hulking frame that radiated pure, feral terror. The beast paced in tight circles, snapping its jaws at the empty air. It growled, the sound rattling the shattered windows. Tessa glanced up. Brant and the estate enforcers stood on the landing of the central staircase. They held their weapons, but their hands shook. They aimed their guns not at the front door, but at the black beast. They feared it. Tessa looked closer at the monster. She saw the familiar, jagged scar cutting through the fur above its left eye. It was Kade. He lost his mind. He paced the room, trapped in a cage of his own rage. He did not recognize his guards. He did not recognize his own home. He looked ready to charge the stairs and tear through his own beta. Tessa planted her boots on the slick floor. She placed her right hand against the stone pillar, using it to haul herself upright. Her broken ribs screamed in protest. Cold sweat broke out across her forehead. She let go of the pillar. She took a step forward. "Do not move, human!" Brant yelled from the landing, his voice cracking with panic. "He is gone! He will kill you!" Tessa ignored the beta. She limps past a fallen ashborn wolf, her boots splashing in the crimson puddles. She kept her eyes locked on the pacing beast. The primal danger terrified her, but the thought of Kade living the rest of his life as a mindless killer hurt worse. She closed the distance. The beast stopped pacing. It whipped its giant head around, its feral eyes zeroing in on the movement. It bared its blood-stained fangs, letting out a roar that shook the floorboards. Tessa did not run. She stood 10 feet away from the Lycan King. She straightened her posture, fighting the urge to clutch her broken side. "Kade," she spoke. Her voice sounded raw, a rasping whisper in the cavernous room, but it carried. The beast froze. Its ears twitched. "Kade, look at me," Tessa demanded. The monster lowered its giant snout, inhaling the air. It caught the scent of her blood, but it also caught the scent of her skin, the lingering trace of talc and soap from the barbershop. The feral fire in its eyes flickered. The human mind battled the beast. Kade recognized the voice. He recognized the steady, pragmatic stare of the woman who held scissors to his throat. The beast whimpered. The massive frame shuddered. The shift back tore through him. The bones cracked, reforming and shrinking. The black fur receded into his skin. Seconds later, Kade fell to his knees on the wet marble. He wore no clothes, his human body covered in the gore of his enemies. He braced his bare hands against the floor, his chest heaving as he gasped for air. Tessa took the final steps. Her knees gave out. She collapsed onto the floor in front of him, the pain in her ribs pulling her down. Kade reached out with trembling hands, catching her before she hit the stone. The feral king returned to a man, anchored by the fragile human bleeding in his arms. The entire pack watched from the stairs in stunned, absolute silence. Chapter 16. The medical wing smelled of sterile alcohol and bleached cotton. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a cold, clinical glow across the white walls. Tessa sat upright on the edge of the examination bed. A thick layer of white bandages wrapped tight around her torso, securing her broken ribs. Her left arm rested in a blue canvas sling. The pack doctor finished stitching the claw marks an hour ago and left the room, leaving the air heavy and quiet. Kade sat in a stiff plastic chair beside the bed. He wore a clean black t-shirt and dark cargo pants. He washed the blood from his skin, but the hollow look in his eyes remained. He stared down at his right hand. A fresh leather glove covered his knuckles. He turned the heavy silver signet ring with his thumb, retrieved from the ruined foyer by Brant, the metal glinting under the harsh lights. He did not speak for a long time. Tessa shifted her weight, wincing as a dull throb echoed in her side. Kade snapped his head up. He leaned forward, hovering his hands over her without making contact. "Do you need the doctor? I will get the doctor." "I just need a painkiller and a new shirt," Tessa said. Her voice lacked its usual sharp edge. "Stop hovering. I am not glass." "You broke against a stone pillar, Tessa," Kade countered. His voice sounded hoarse. He dropped his hands back to his lap, clenching his jaw. "You stopped breathing. I watched your heart stop." "I woke up. I am sitting right here." "Because you got lucky," Kade stated. He stood up, pacing the short length of the sterile room. The walls felt too close. He carried the tension of the battlefield in his shoulders. "I brought this war to your door. I burned your business to the ground. I promised you the blue zones were safe. I promised you protection." He stopped pacing and turned to face her. The guilt etched deep lines around his eyes. "I failed," Kade admitted. The confession cost him. A king never admits defeat, but the man standing before her stripped away his royal pride. "My shield cracked. Ashbourne walked into my home and almost killed you. I could not stop them in time." "You killed 20 of them," Tessa pointed out. You stopped them." "I lost my mind, Tessa." Kade looked at his gloved hand. He hated the lack of control. "I went feral. If you did not wake up, I would have slaughtered Brant. I would have torn down this entire estate. You pulled me back." Tessa processed his words. She looked at the bandages wrapped around her ribs. She felt the fragility of her own bones. A harsh, pragmatic truth settled in her chest. "Tessa, as long as I am breakable, I am a weapon his enemies can use against him. I refuse to be his weak spot." "I survive the streets because I know my limits," Tessa said, looking up at him. "I dodge fights I cannot win. But this world does not care about limits. Your enemies do not fight fair." "They target the weak," Kade agreed, the words tasting bitter. He walked back to the plastic chair and sat down. He leaned in close, his glowing eyes searching her face. "You do not belong in this crossfire. Humans die easy here. One claw strike, one shove against a wall." "Are you firing your personal groomer?" Tessa asked, forcing a small, strange smirk. Kade did not smile back. "I am telling you the truth. You are too fragile for my world. I cannot lock you in a panic room every time the alarm rings. I cannot let you live your life waiting for the next attack." He reached out, his bare left hand gently resting over her uninjured hand. The feverish heat of his skin brought a strange comfort to the cold room. "I have to fix this," Kade murmured, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "I have to ensure you never break again." The weight of his words hung in the sterile air. He took full accountability for her pain, and Tessa knew a king like Kade did not make empty promises. He planned to change the rules of her survival. Chapter 17. Kade paced the length of the sterile room. His boots hit the linoleum floor in a relentless, steady rhythm. He walked from the locked door to the drawn window blinds and back again. The replacement leather glove on his right hand creaked every time he clenched his fist. The heavy silver signet ring caught the harsh fluorescent light, a constant reminder of the crown he bore. Tessa watched him from the edge of the examination bed. Every time she drew a breath, the white bandages around her torso pulled tight. The broken ribs sent a sharp spike of pain through her chest. Her left arm rested heavy in the blue canvas sling. "Pacing will not fix my ribs," Tessa stated. Her voice lacked its usual volume, but the sharp edge remained intact. Kade stopped. He turned his glowing eyes toward her. The guilt carved deep lines around his mouth. "I need to move. If I stand still, I remember the sound of your bones snapping against that pillar." "I am alive," she reminded him. "You survived," Kade corrected. He walked to the edge of the bed. He refused to sit in the plastic chair again. He needed to stand. He needed to prepare for the hardest conversation of his life. "Survival is not living, Tessa. It is just delaying death. You delayed death tonight." "I fought back. I took a knife to a monster fight and I walked away." "You were carried away," Kade shot back, his tone turning harsh. He did not want to sugarcoat the truth. He needed her to understand the brutal reality of his world. "You anchored me. You brought my mind back from the feral state. I owe you my sanity. But you are a fragile human surrounded by predators. That Ashbourne scout treated you like a rag doll. The next one will tear your throat out." Tessa dropped her gaze to her lap. She hated the pity in his voice. She hated the truth in his words even more. She built a life in the Narrows by relying on her own grit. She fixed her own doors. She earned her own cash, but grit did not stop a giant beast from throwing her across a marble room. "Tessa, as long as I am breakable, I am a weapon his enemies can use against him. I refuse to be his weak spot." She looked back up, meeting his intense stare. "You want to send me away. You want to buy me a ticket to a safe zone and lock me behind another steel door." Kade clenched his jaw. He reached out, resting his bare left hand on the mattress near her hip. The feverish heat from his skin soaked through the thin hospital blanket. "I want to protect you," Kade said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "I can put you on a plane tomorrow. I can give you enough cash to buy a dozen barbershops in a city where wolves do not exist. You will never have to look over your shoulder again." "And what happens to you?" Tessa asked. She refused to let him break eye contact. What happens the next time your enemies breach the gates and you go feral? Who calls you back? Brant will figure it out, or the pack will put me down with silver. I am not leaving, Tessa decided. The words left her lips with finality. The pain in her ribs flared as she sat up straighter, but she ignored it. I ran from the Narrows. I will not run from this estate. I trade one fight for another. I choose this fight. You do not understand the stakes, Kade argued. He leaned closer, dominating the space between them. I cannot focus on a war if I spend every waking second terrified you are bleeding out on my floor. Your fragility is a leash around my neck. It makes me weak. Tessa felt a knot form in her throat. She gripped the edge of the mattress with her good hand. She knew he spoke the truth. The Lycan King could not afford a human liability. Then fix it, Tessa challenged. She stared straight into the glowing fire of his eyes. You said you planned to change the rules of my survival. Do it. Make me unbreakable. Chapter 18. Kade went rigid. The silence in the medical wing stretched out, heavy and suffocating. He stared at the defiant woman sitting in front of him. She sat battered, bruised, and wrapped in bandages, yet she commanded the room. You do not know what you are asking, Kade warned. I am asking for an upgrade, Tessa shot back. I am asking you to remove the target from my back. You brought me into this war. Give me the tools to fight it. Kade turned his back to her. He dragged his bare hand across his face, exhaling a long, ragged breath. He walked to the counter, bracing his hands against the cold metal edge. Kade, I offer her death to give her life. It breaks my soul. He stayed silent for a full minute. Tessa waited. She refused to press him. She let the gravity of her demand settle over him. Finally, Kade turned around. The conflict in his expression vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating focus of a commander. The bite is not magic, Kade began, his voice devoid of emotion. It is a biological war. My venom carries the Lycan mutation. When it enters your bloodstream, it attacks your human cells. It forces your DNA to rewrite itself in a matter of hours. Tessa listened, keeping her breathing shallow to avoid the sting in her ribs. The process brings pure agony, Kade continued. He walked back to the bed, standing over her. Your blood will boil. Your bones will crack and reform. The fever will burn away your human weakness, but your body will fight the change. The human immune system rejects the venom. What are the odds? Tessa asked, cutting straight to the point. Kade swallowed hard. A straight 50%, a toss of a coin. Half the humans who take the bite adapt and survive. The other half suffer complete organ failure. Their hearts give out before the fever breaks. The numbers hung in the air. A coin toss. Live as a Lycan or die in a sterile medical bed. 50%, Tessa repeated. She looked down at her arm in the blue sling. She thought about the towering ashborn wolf in the grand foyer. She remembered the feeling of utter helplessness when her back hit the stone pillar. If you survive, Kade said, his tone softening, you heal. Your ribs knit together, the claw marks vanish. You gain the speed, the strength, and the cellular regeneration of my bloodline. You become my equal. And if I lose the coin toss? I lose my mate, Kade stated. The raw honesty of the confession stripped the air from the room. He did not say groomer. He did not say human. He laid his claim bare. Tessa felt a jolt run through her veins. The heat radiating from his body suddenly felt like a lifeline. He wanted her beside him, ruling his empire, but he refused to force the choice. He placed the power entirely in her hands. I am terrified of losing you, Kade admitted. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. If you say no, I will protect you with my last breath. I will guard this room myself. You never have to face the monsters again. Tessa leaned into his touch. Her pragmatic mind weighed the options. Stay human, stay fragile, and watch the man she loved tear himself apart trying to keep her safe. Or roll the dice. I hate coin tosses, Tessa whispered, "but I hate hiding in panic rooms more." Kade's eyes flared wide. "Tessa." "I choose the bite," Tessa declared. Her voice held no hesitation. She lifted her chin, exposing the smooth skin of her neck. "Do it before I lose my nerve." Chapter 19. Kade froze. He stared at the pulse jumping in the hollow of her throat. The scent of her blood still lingered in the room, a sharp reminder of her mortality. He needed to make her immortal. "Are you certain?" Kade asked. His voice dropped to a rough whisper. "I never miss," Tessa replied, quoting her own rule. She reached up with her good hand, gripping the front of his black t-shirt. She pulled him down toward her. Kade did not resist. He climbed onto the edge of the examination bed, his large frame towering over her. He cradled the back of her head with his bare left hand, his fingers tangling in her hair. He brought his face close to her neck. His breath cascaded hot against her skin. "Tessa, the fire consumes everything. If I let go, I lose him." "Hold on to me," Kade commanded. He opened his jaws, his fangs extended, sharp and lethal. He pressed his lips against the junction of her shoulder and neck. He bit down. The piercing pain stole Tessa's breath. She let out a sharp gasp, her fingers twisting into the fabric of his shirt. The fangs sank deep into muscle. She felt the rush of venom flood her veins. It did not feel like liquid, it felt like liquid fire. Kade pulled back. A single drop of blood traced a path down her collarbone. He pressed his thumb against the puncture wounds, sealing them. The reaction hit Tessa a second later. A violent shudder racked her body. The fire in her neck spread outward, rushing down her spine and flooding her chest. Her heart battered against her ribs like a frantic drumbeat. The broken bones in her torso burned, the pain amplifying tenfold. She let out a scream, the sound tearing through the quiet medical wing. "I have you," Kade said. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against his chest. He was careful to avoid putting pressure on her ribs, but he held her tight enough to ground her. "Fight it, Tessa. Let the venom work. Let it burn." Tessa squeezed her eyes shut. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The fever spiked in a matter of minutes. The sterile room dissolved into a blur of heat and agony. She felt her blood boiling, her cells warring against the foreign invader. Outside the heavy door, footsteps approached. Brant's voice filtered through the wood. "Alpha! We heard a scream!" "Do not enter!" Kade roared, his Alpha command vibrating the walls. "Keep the wing secured." Tessa thrashed against him. The blue canvas sling snapped. She arched her back, her muscles pulling taut as the mutation took hold. The pain eclipsed everything she knew. She forgot the burning barbershop. She forgot the shattered grand foyer. She knew only the inferno in her veins. "Breathe," Kade urged, rocking her back and forth. His voice cracked. The feral king sounded terrified. He pressed his face into her hair, his breath hitching. "Do not leave me. You promised me a fight. Stay here." Tessa tried to draw a breath, but her lungs felt scorched. The fever peaked, turning her skin to burning coals. She gripped Kade's arms, her nails digging into his skin. The fire reached her head. A blinding white light exploded behind her eyelids. Her heart gave one final, violent kick against her ribs. Then, everything went black. Kade felt her body go limp. The frantic pulse against his chest vanished. He stared down at the motionless woman in his arms, the silence of the medical wing returning with crushing weight. The coin landed. Now he waited for the result. Chapter 20. The fever broke like a feverish storm giving way to a crisp dawn. The blinding pain evaporated, leaving behind a strange, thrumming energy. Tessa took a breath. Her lungs expanded. The sharp spike of agony in her chest did not follow. She took another, deeper breath. She opened her eyes. The harsh fluorescent lights of the medical wing no longer stung. Her vision possessed a new, terrifying clarity. She saw the microscopic dust motes dancing in the air. She heard the steady, rhythmic heartbeat of the man sitting beside her. She smelled his distinct scent, cedar and cold rain, unmasked by the sterile alcohol of the room. Kade sat in the plastic chair. His elbows rested on his knees, his face buried in his hands. He looked defeated. Tessa pushed herself up. She did not wince. She looked down at her torso. She grabbed the edge of the thick white bandages and pulled. The fabric ripped away, exposing her skin. The dark purple bruises covering her ribs were gone. The skin looked smooth and unbroken. She lifted her left arm. The blue canvas sling lay ruined on the floor. She flexed her fingers, inspecting the spot where the Ashbourne wolf carved 3 deep claw marks into her bicep. Only 3 faint, silvery lines remained. She was whole. She was unbreakable. "Kade," she spoke. Her voice sounded different. It carried a low, resonant hum, a subtle echo of the beast sleeping beneath her skin. Kade's head snapped up. He jumped out of the chair, closing the distance in a blur of motion. He stopped inches from the bed, his chest heaving. He stared at her face. The pragmatic human barber was gone. Tessa returned his stare, her eyes no longer their original shade. They flashed a brilliant, glowing gold. Kade let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He dropped to his knees beside the bed, wrapping his arms around her waist. He buried his face in her stomach, his broad shoulders shaking. The Lycan King surrendered his pride, overwhelmed by the sheer relief of her survival. "You won the toss," Kade whispered, his voice muffled against her bare skin. Tessa ran her fingers through his short hair. The feverish heat of his skin now felt matching to her own. "I told you, I never miss." He pulled back, standing up and taking her hands in his. He pulled her off the bed. Tessa's boots hit the floor. She felt the raw power coiling in her legs. The fragility of her human body felt like a distant memory. "The pack is waiting," Kade said. His glowing eyes met her golden ones. "They need to see the woman who tamed the feral king." He did not grab her hand. He offered his arm. She took it. They walked out of the medical wing together. Brant stood guard in the corridor, his submachine gun slung over his shoulder. He turned. He saw the golden flash of Tessa's eyes. The rugged beta dropped his gaze to the floor and bared his neck, offering complete submission to his new queen. Kade led her through the estate, navigating the debris of the grand foyer. They walked out through the splintered front doors and stepped onto the elevated stone landing overlooking the central courtyard. Below them, hundreds of Lycans gathered in the morning mist. They survived the siege, but they waited for their leader. Kade stood at the railing. He raised his right hand, the heavy silver ring gleaming on the fresh leather glove. He gestured to the woman standing proudly beside him. He did not speak a word. He did not need to. The pack looked up. They saw the golden eyes. They saw the unbreakable stance. A single roar erupted from the courtyard, followed by another, until the entire pack raised their voices to the sky. They welcomed their equal. They welcomed the Lycan Queen. The end. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Zola was brave for kicking the Alpha King out of bed, wait until you meet the heroine in this next story. She puts a pair of sharp steel scissors to a Lycan King's throat and doesn't even flinch. You have to hear this disaster unfold. Click the video on your screen right now. It is total madness.